about the idea of והתהלכתי בתוככם and והתהלכתי, that there's two types of traveling. There is Torah versus mitzvahs, or Torah shebiksav versus Torah shabal or Torah mitzvahs versus the world, which means there's the traveling that comes from above to below, and then there's the traveling that comes from below to above. Torah coming from heaven, mitzvahs coming done with physical things, Torah shebiksav being Hashem's words, Torah shabal is our words, etc., all the different levels that he spoke about. And this is all in our avodah. So when we have the avodah that we actually go in such a type of way of dealing with the two levels of halicha, so there's also the v'salachti b'soichechem, that Hashem in turn also does the same, that he has the traveling from above to below and below to above, and that is higher than Nasati Mishkani B'Soicham, as we mentioned at the beginning of the Maimon, which we still have to explain. So again, we're holding Ois Daled on the third page of the copies, bottom of the page. The ultimate purpose of the giving with the Torah is specifically down here below, which is what we were speaking about, that the avodah is not just hamshachim l'mayla mata, but the elevation l'mata l'mayla, like the ladder standing on the ground and reaching upwards. Therefore, the Torah was not given to Malachim. When the Malachim asked Hashem, they want to have the Torah. So, they said, place your glory on the heavens, leave your Torah here. Like Moshe responded to the Malachim, did you then descend to Mitzrayim? Do you then have a Yetzirah? So therefore, it's not applicable to you, the whole idea of Torah. The ultimate purpose and goal of giving the Torah is to descend down here below, to refine the world. To such a degree, not just the world in general, but even descending into Mitzrayim. To influence and to transform also the idea of Mitzrayim and what it stands for, the klippos that Mitzrayim stands for. Mitzrayim is about, to me, is my denial, and I made myself. The idea of saying to me is denial and I made myself is even lower than saying that Hashem is the God of gods. In other words, he recognizes that Hashem is highest. But Li Oidi V'Ani says that I'm the only thing there is. So that's the lowest. That's the lowest level. Sh'amar Pari, the king of Mitzrayim, said this. Shetachas Shlitasoi, Haiseret Mitzrayim, under his control and rule was the land of Mitzrayim. Va'ad Shoyi Moshe will keep it to such a degree. He was a superpower. He reigned over the globe. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu told the Malachim, did you then descend to Mitzrayim? So too, when he said, is there Yetzirah amongst you Malachim? The idea of Yetzirah is the lowest idea, the lowest level. The Afshomer Rizal, the Chazal said, that Satan and Penina, both of them, their intention was for heaven. In other words, when Penina was teasing Elkanah's wife Chana about her not having children, it was to get her not chas v'sholom, she was trying to put her down and so on, but to get her to daven stronger. The same thing, the Satan, his intention is to get a yid to refuse and to not follow its instructions. So they both intend for Shem Shomayim. So the idea of Yetzirah is maybe not so terrible. So he says, that's only the root of the Yetzirah, the way it's above, that the Satan has intention for good. As opposed to the way Yetzirah is down here below by us. It's a matter that opposes godliness. Like the idea of the land of Mitzrayim, like we said before. And only there, down into that lowest level, to the level of Mitzrayim, and to the level where there's a Yetzirah, that's where the Torah descended. It's a descent to a low place that there's nothing lower than it. And not only is it descended to a low place, but like we said before, it's even below the idea of Malkim, below the idea of the place Mitzrayim and so on is even lower from the entire category of place. Like we explained previously, that the word Mokim is the numerical equivalent of Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke when you multiply every letter by itself. So you could say Mokim and Havaya are not identical. Mokim is only a gematria, even though it's only a numerical equivalent. It's only through being doubled. The fact that it's not even an ordinary gematria, but as soon as you add more layers to a gematria, so every time you add another layer to the gematria performance, so then that shows on an even further distance from its original source. That all of this, the fact first of all that it's a gematria, and then further that it's not a regular gematria, but it's a gematria of, in this case, the merubah gematria, where you have to multiply every letter by itself. So that indicates that it's coming through many constrictions and through a chain descent, like the Alter Rebbe says in Shari Yechud Amuna, that all the different gematria tricks that's necessary to be employed to be able to find all the creations in the Asar Mamadas, so every single thing that needs to go through another process of gematria shows on further tzimtzumim. So therefore, telling me that it's lower than the category of Makim, because Makim is the gematria of Yud Ke Vav Ke, but in truth it's a very constricted and mitzumtzum level of Yud Ke Vav Ke. So the Rebbe concludes the brackets, Mikol Mokim, yes, like upon a it still has some type of association with the name Yud Ke Vav Ke. So therefore, it cannot be Mitzrayim. It's a hard account have to do even with Mokim, which has even a very tenuous association with Yud Ke Vav Ke. These two things, Mitzrayim, Yitzhahara, since they're opposing godliness, they're lower even than the category and definition of Mokim in its simple sense, meaning not the way it's the Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke, but the way it's already been transformed through the Gematria into the word Mokim. Despite the fact that Mitzrayim Yitzhahara is so low, they're below Mokim even. The Torah comes down also to these matters, to Mitzrayim, to Yitzhahara. Why? To refine them. Only through the Torah descending to Mitzrayim and to the Yitzhahara is completed the purpose of why the Torah was given, because it was given to deal with Mitzrayim. It was given to deal with the Yitzhahara, as Moshe Rabbeinu told the Malach. Now, how can the Torah reach so low? That itself is dependent upon how high it comes from. Like in a simple sense, we always bring the mashal, or not such a common mashal, the power of a light that it could reach further away is dependent upon how strong the light is in its source. If it's very strong in its source, so then it will reach much further. So the same thing, to be able to reach the most furthest place, to place that's beneath Makim, to Mitzrayim, Yitzhahara, the Torah has to come from a place that's way higher than everything. This occurs through the Torah being drawn down from a place that's totally higher than the entire category of the world. This is something that came about specifically through the giving of the Torah. Though also before the giving of the Torah, Torah was beyond the world. Like we know, it says that 2,000 years, which goes on levels and so on, the Torah preceded the world. So therefore, even before there was Matan Torah, there was already Torah the way it's beyond the worlds. But it's not the same as what happened by Matan Torah. We call Matan still in all. You cannot say that the Torah and the worlds are totally incomparable. The very fact that there is a measure, there's an amount, how much the Torah preceded the world, Alpaim Shana. So the very fact that you could measure and define the distance between them, 2,000 years, whatever the meaning of 2,000 years is, means it still means that they have a connection with each other, and that's the Torah before the giving of the Torah the way it existed before Matan Torah. As opposed to Matan Torah, the Torah came down from what it says in the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, that I will, I'm sorry, in Mishlei, that I will be for Hashem a plaything, a toy. That the idea that it's by Hashem himself, Etzloi, dealing with Hashem's essential delight, that's higher than the idea of 2,000 years. Shana, which is literally year, is related to the word shinui, change, because the idea of a shana, a year, is a whole process of change throughout the seasons and so on. So the idea of alpaim shana, 2,000 years, is malshoin shinuyim, is from the level of changes, from an expression of changes. But by Matan Torah, when it came from a level ve'eya etzloi shashuyim, shashuyim is higher than the level of the changes of alpaim shana. Because the Torah came down from the level of Hashem's unchanging being. I Hashem am unchanged. That's what happened by Matan Torah. And from that, it came into a world. And then afterwards, that came down to the level of, that says also over there in Mishlei, that I will be a plaything, I will be a toy for Hashem day after day. And the Chazal connected with Alpaim Shana, with the 2,000 years. Day, as we know, a day by Hashem is equal to 1,000 years, like the Melch says in Tehillim. So the plaything for day after day is talking about Alpaim Shana. So first there's a higher level of Etzli Shashuyim, that's Etzloi, it's by him, that's higher than Seder Shtalshlus, that's where the Torah comes from by Matan Torah. And then it descends through the level of Shashuyim Yoim Yoim. Like it's explained in different Amarim about in that pasuk where it says Vayetla Shashuyim, and it says Shashuyim Yoim Yoim, it says Mesachekes Table Artse, etc., etc. There's 5 different levels of the Torah coming down. Would this also be understood what the Chazal said, because the Torah is be'etzem, completely removed from the world, and that's the way the Torah was given to us by Matan Torah. So the Chazal said, David nenash al shakara divrei Torah b'shem zmiris, top of page 199. That David HaMelech called the Torah as songs. Zmiris hayolichu kecha, your chukim were to me like songs. The fact that David HaMelech used and looked at the Torah as something that's a song, and it's something enjoyable for him, and it comforted him in the times when he was running away from his enemies and he was suffering, and he looked at the Torah as a means of consolation. We're talking here about a very high level of Torah. Mikol Makom still in all, that is not the primary quality and advantage of Torah, because its main quality is the way it's drawn down from the level that I am by Him. I'm completely joined with Hashem in the unchanging level of Hashem, and the unchanging level of Torah came by Matan Torah. And because it came down from the highest, that's why by Matan Torah can come down to the lowest, to deal with Mitzrayim, to deal with Yetzer Hara. So now he's going to connect that to the idea that in our Parsha, it speaks about the amazing promises that have to do with the physical realm, because it's all about the physical. According to what we said before. That the drawing on the Torah from the most highest level is specifically down here below. Will be understood the reason the main things that were foretold in the psukim in our parsha are things that have to do with physical benefits and physical promises of what will be. The seemingly it's not understood like the well-known note in the series of Amarim of Tafri Samach Vav. Why was there given in the Torah physical promises, physical things that were foretold for the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. When concerning all those things necessary for the external part of the world, the giving Gashmias from Hashem, that's already included in the promise and the covenant that Hashem made with Noach. And that was a covenant that Hashem made for the external, physical running of the world. Like it says in the pasuk, that Hashem promised Noach that for the rest of the times of the existence of the earth, the time of planting, the time of harvesting will not cease. And therefore, we already have promises for the physical world. Why do we need to have that? We do Torah mitzvahs, then we're going to get physical things. We can add to the explanation of this question that the Rebbe brought from Tavrish Samach Vav, this idea that it will not cease concerning the existence of the external aspect of the world, without drawing down an inner power, an inner energy from Hashem, only prior to Matan Torah could there be the separation between physical brachas and spiritual things. Prior to Matan Torah, there was a decree separating that those above will not descend below, and those below will not ascend above. This means what is the meaning of that decree? That means the top cannot combine with the bottom. Therefore, in the times before Matan Torah, the greatest reward that was possible to be in this world is only the physical rewards. That was foretold it'll be physical. You cannot give anything spiritual because the spiritual is completely separated from the physical world. As opposed to when we find ourselves already post Matan Torah, once a decree ceased, especially when there's the service in the way of with my chukim, and that itself, in a way of traveling, I said going, we have from above to below and below to above. Seemingly, then it could be and it should be the reward in spiritual matters because we have the going from above to below and the below to above. So there's no reason to separate and say we can't bring a spiritual reward into this world. Therefore, it's further not understood why we're given physical promises for the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. According to what we explained previously, we understood. Its ultimate purpose and goal in the give of the Torah is that it should descend down here below on this earth. Specifically the physical world that captures, if you will, Hashem's essence. This is because the great advantage of the physical, that the physical has a special connection with Hashem's essence, more so than the spiritual. Therefore, therefore also the promises and what was foretold is also physical promises, physical benefits. Until the general idea that it says, I will give you the rains in your time, but it's not limited to rains. Like that Baal Shem Tov explains, I will give Gishmeichem B'itom means I will give you Gashmis in its time. So in other words, that the entire promise revolves around Gashmis. Why? Because Gashmis has to do with Hashem in a stronger way, and that's what the entire purpose of the Torah mitzvahs were, specifically the physical world. This is also an explanation concerning what's foretold concerning Mashiach's times, that they are physical promises. Yisrael will give forth tasty baked goods and woolen garments. The movement seems not understood. How could it be, after all the great qualities and advantages and the great spiritual revelations and the amazing type of godly revelation of Mashiach's times, what are we promising them? You'll have cookies. Well, what type of promise is that? But the idea behind this is that's because the great advantage and quality of the physical. Top of page 200, that the great quality and advantage of the receiving of the reward when Mashiach comes will be specifically to souls the way they are in bodies. Like the Ramban says that the main reward of the world to come is after Tchias HaMesim, and so too Chassidus rules in contrast to the way the Rambam holds that even though there's going to be Tchias HaMesim, but that's not the ultimate reward. The ultimate reward is to Neshamas without bodies. Why do we hold that the bodily reward of Tchias HaMesim is the ultimate? That's because the advantage and quality of the physical body. This is also what the main idea of performance of mitzvahs when Mashiach comes. Like we say in Musaf davening, that there, when Mashiach comes, we will first do the mitzvahs as you wanted it to be done. We've spoken about this before, because then the world, the object of which we do the mitzvah will be perfect. The person performing the mitzvah will be perfect. So therefore, the mitzvahs will be done in the most perfect way. And that is who be mitzvahs ma'asis dafka, specifically in mitzvahs in action, because it's about this world that it's all about. All of this is connected with the advantage of the physical body. So the Rebbe says, interestingly, therefore we have to be very careful on guarding our bodily health. It's impossible for a person to understand and come up with ideas, and he's hungry and he's sick. Like the Baal Shem Tov says that you must surely help the donkey. Now, what's it talking about? The donkey is referring to the body. One has to refine the body and purify it. Not to break it with all types of afflictions like it was commonly done by those that were very pious prior to the times of the Baal Shem Tov. Like the Mezritcher Magid writes, a small hole in the body becomes a big hole in the soul. So in other words, it's very important for one to guard their bodily health, because the body is the main part and the main purpose of the whole entire Torah mitzvahs and the connection to above. So he concludes in we're talking about two travels, from above to below and below to above. Initially, we have to start from above to below. Through the Torah, which is the words of Hashem. And following that comes the avodah from below to above. It has to be in a way of traveling. Traveling, so this explains, means not being limited at all by where you're going. Avodah that's without boundaries, that's the avodah of self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is matters concerning all the Torah mitzvahs. Like it's explained in Tanya, why did Moshe Rabbeinu command in Mishnah Torah and Chumash Dvarim to the generation that came to Eretz Yisrael to read Kriya Shema twice a day, to accept upon oneself the kingdom of heaven with self-sacrifice? Seemingly, there's no need for self-sacrifice. He promised them that your fear and your trembling fear and your making them scared will be upon all the nations. So therefore, there is no risk to life when they not enter Eretz Yisrael. But rather, on the spiritual sense, the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs is dependent upon the person remembering constantly that he would be willing to give up his life for Hashem, and therefore he's willing to go through anything to be able to do any mitzvah for Hashem. Just like he is doing the halicha, which is b'li gvul, which is the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. So the reward is also Hashem saying v'salachti, he will travel. And all this, and also what Hashem said, he will travel. It says in the plural. The koyal beis halichas maila. It's referring to the two trips from above to below and below to above. והנה והתהלכתי הוא נעלה יויסר מהעניין ונסעתי משכני בתוככם שהוא עניין בית המקדש. We said earlier that the fact that it says נסעתי משכני בתוככם, that's going on the base hamikdash, and afterwards it says והתהלכתי בתוככם. So obviously והתהלכתי is a higher reward than the base hamikdash. So he says the difference between the two is that the V'Salachti is like the miracles that occurred in the Beis HaMikdash. There's the Beis HaMikdash itself, the way it runs in a normal way, and the miraculous part of the Beis HaMikdash, that's the V'Salachti. Shezeh al derech ha'inyan dasor nisim shenaslav seinu Beis HaMikdash inyan hanesu shenimshach inyan naila yoyser ha'makom shebay nasa nes. The idea of a miracle is that it comes from a much higher level than the place in which the miracle takes place. This means the miracles that occur in the Beis HaMikdash is even higher than the level of the Beis HaMikdash itself. That's why after saying I will make you the Beis HaMikdash, then it says I will go amongst you. The traveling amongst you, that will be after. I will place my resting place amongst you. That's referring to the Beis HaMikdash. It's a much higher level than the revelation of the Beis HaMikdash. Just like the idea of my traveling says in the plural, that indicates the two types of traveling from above to below and below to above. So too, in the conclusion of the matter, it says, I will lead you upright to heights. Like the two opinions, we mentioned this, I think, in a previous mimer. Masayim Amma, either the two heights means 200 Amma, because Adam Arishon was 100 Amma height, so two heights is 200. Meya Amma, or the heights are referring to 100 Amma high, connected Hechol Ksalov, corresponding to the Beis HaMikdash on its walls. And the truth is, they're not arguing. The 200 versus 100 doesn't mean that there were different heights, but rather, it's actually similar to what it says in Sefer HaBohir. There's the 10 spheres from above to below, and the 10 spheres from below to above. These are the identical 10 spheres. But rather, there's the 10 spheres the way we counted from above to below, and there's the 10 spheres the way we counted from below to above. There's some that in some place in Kabbalah where it speaks about that the first day of Spheres Omer is Malchus Sheva Malchus, and the last day of Spheres Omer is Chesed Sheba Chesed. That's going Milmata L'mayla. In a similar vein concerning the two opinions of Kohen Mius. Meya Amma and Messiah Amma, the 100 or the 200 Amma, doesn't mean that there was a difference in height, but rather, there's the 100 Amma, but there's the two directions that it can go in. It can go from below to above, or above to below. Similar to the ladder of Yaakov Avinu, it says, Malach Elkim, Oilim v'Yordim, they go up and go down. By days of through this we come to the fulfillment of the promise that I will lead you upright in the simple sense, in an upright stature. This is already applicable in the time of exile itself. Concerning the neshama and the spiritual matters, like the well-known saying of my father-in-law, only our bodies were placed into exile and under the servitude of kings. But our neshamas were not given over to Golus and the servitude of kings or governments until we merit the fulfillment of the promise. I will lead you upright the way it's going to be when Mashiach comes. In the true and complete redemption, the coming of Mashiach Tzedkenu soon, mamash.